Working as an FBI special agent was my dream job. My whistleblowing was apolitical and in the spirit of upholding my oath. Nonetheless, the FBI cynically elected to close ranks and attack the messenger.
The FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. We are all examples of that.
Joining us now are Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
FBI whistleblowers Steve Friend and Garrett O'Boyle both join us now. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the program. Thank you for your testimony.
We need more folks like you, and I'm sure more people going to be from your background are going to be giving you guys more intel as you're sharing that with the rest of us. We can kind of see that this is becoming normal for them to be held accountable, because I think especially an institution that we pay their salaries, they need to be held accountable.
I think a lot of people do share our beliefs and convictions. I think they just aren't at the point that Steve and I and others have gotten to. They're too afraid.
Thank you so much for being a guest here on PBD Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
How big is that bloody flag that Steve's got? It's the stone wall of his house. Lots of love, guys. Thanks very much for joining us.
Steve Friend, Garrett O'Boyle. Thank you for being with us this morning. More importantly, thank you for speaking out. We appreciate it.
You're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and pursue the truth with FBI whistleblowers and founding suspendables Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast on a Tuesday, starting a brand new week, January 21st, 2025. We're live streaming on Rumble. Rumble.com/amradpod is where you can find us Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. We're also streaming on a new X account, which is called @XAmericaNews. Hoping to pick up some folks there. It's a new experiment. So if you haven't already, give them a follow at America News. And if you listen to the podcast form on iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, any of those, make sure that you subscribe and give us a 5-star rating so we can continue to grow and expand. Today, the theme of the day is I Do Declare. And the Uncle Sam thumbnail that we had was an upgrade, because originally I had a debutante there with a megaphone. It just didn't quite fit with our vibe. But we're going to be talking about rule by executive order, fiat, if you will, and the fact that if you live by the pen, you might die by the pen. And we're going to talk about how Joe Biden, the human Roomba, former president of the United States, now on his way out, left us with a hot mess of executive orders and pardons. And now the incoming Trump administration is returning the favor in kind. So we'll give all of the assessment there. And maybe if we have some time, talk about a CNN case that we originally teased a couple weeks back, and now there's been a resolution to it. So all that, so much more with us today on the American Radicals Podcast. Garrett is here. He made it just in the nick of time. At GOB Actual is where you find him on social media. He made it because he is getting ripped and shredded. Give him a Band-Aid. That guy is just ripped, right?
Trying to get cut up like a diamond over here, Steve. I do declare, though. Yeah, I did. I skidded in the nick of time because, hey, it's 2025 and lots of things are changing. So I figured I might as well try to change for the better too.
Lots of things are changing. Did you know we had a 28th Amendment, Garrett? I mean, I'm a scholar of the documents that establish our government, but our former president declared over the weekend that we have a 28th Amendment.
I do declare.
He declared it. The Equal Rights Amendment is now the law of the land, and it's written in extra big font, so you know that that's true. Because on the back of the Declaration of Independence, in the invisible ink, it says that if you write things in really big font, that makes it true and makes it happen. This was a declaration that came out. I don't really believe that Joe Biden was declaring this. I think this was whatever the staffer was in charge of the social media account, but that was sort of the genesis for me coming up with the idea of I do declare. And I think it's worth actually a little bit of time, because do you remember the Equal Rights Amendment being a thing at all? I mean, I guess it was passed and then get the requisite number of states in the requisite amount of time. So it's now defunct and dead. But do you actually know the content of the Equal Rights Amendment?
I can't say that I do, Steve, because I've kind of operated for, I don't know, my entire life that we all already had equal rights in this country. So, I might have overlooked this one a little bit.
That's always what government does, though. I mean, they'll declare like the Puppies Are Cute Act, and then you read into it. It's like, by the way, we can take all your guns and spy on you whenever we want.
And oh, yeah, those puppies, we're going to do experiments on them and have Dr. Fauci strap them to a table and send hundreds of flies to eat their skulls.
Don't jump ahead. He got a pardon. He's completely innocent, by the way. All
Of
right.
course, of
So,
course.
to the Equal Rights Act, I actually pulled up the literature on it and what it states. The Equal Rights Act states, and I quote, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. The Congress shall have the power to enforce by appropriate legislation the provisions of this article. So it sounds like equality for everyone. You can't discriminate against people because of their genitalia that they have waggling between their legs. But what does it really mean? It
Steve, I'm struggling over here. Can you help me? Can you break this down a little bit more for me? Because maybe I'm stuck in the 1990s in a solitary ACLU office somewhere. Because I thought we had the 14th Amendment and the Equal Protection Clause and the Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and the Bill of Rights and all sorts of these protections and other government instituted regalia that already declared it was already declared that we had equal rights. Am I wrong here?
Well, I mean, you have to interpret it, particularly the Civil Rights Act and Section 7 of that, because sex is the same as gender, which is a spectrum. So dudes who feel pretty can dress in locker rooms with women according to the law of the land. Uh,
Because they're sexual deviants, right? Okay.
Unless, of course, we know what a woman is, which is what's part of the Equal Rights Act, which actually intends to say that the federal government can pass legislation that stops states from prohibiting baby murder. That's really what it's a backdoor to. It's
Of
the
course.
Cute Puppies Act, but murder babies on demand whenever, because the federal government will pass a law that essentially makes that the law of the land. So, although the Equal Rights Amendment did not explicitly mention abortion, many scholars and analysts have argued that it could provide an alternative constitutional foundation for abortion rights. And further on, the archivist of the U.S. says, no, you can't actually go on X and declare the law of the land has changed. Um, but I think that that's the premise I want to set up for. I do declare that the battle lines ideologically on this issue have been going back and forth. We had the Dobbs versus Jackson decision that came out and overturned Roe versus Wade, and that was a genesis for a whole bunch of weaponization. We've talked about the FACE Act violations that got spun up, the threats to SCOTUS that was just we're going to go after pro-lifers through another lens if we need to. But for our purposes today, I want to bring up a couple of different perspectives on this issue. One, we're going to go to New Jersey, where Phil Murphy, governor, on his way out. This is an election year, by the way, for New Jersey for the governorship. Should be interesting to know. But he's preparing his state now that Donald Trump has reassumed office as the president of the United States. And he's directed his state to stockpile abortion pills. He did this before the inauguration yesterday.
The godless heathens have to have their baby murder, Steve.
He's one of a handful of Democrat governors who criticized Trump, but now he's doing the whole Fetterman. He says that he wants to cooperate as long as they agree on things.
Was he wearing shorts and a hoodie when he declared that?
No, no, he's not nearly as physically imposing as John Fetterman, who is like a Herman Munster. But Murphy said
He's like Boo Radley.
Murphy will not back down from, quote, anti-choice policies. And this is what we always talk about language, Garrett, right? We basically, I thought, had settled on nobody's anti anything, right? You can be pro-choice and we'll be pro-life, and that way we're all pro everything. And then they play the game and they shift it. That's why if you read something from Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness, it'll say pro-choice and anti-choice, right? I mean, it's the paradigm shifting here. But I do think that this piece, which comes from, what is this, New Jersey News or something like that?
New Jersey.
Yeah. New Jersey joins other Democrat-led states, including Massachusetts, California, leading the way as always, stockpiling mifepristone, one of the two drugs in combination to end pregnancies. Oh, you mean murder babies. Again, language. Abortion rights groups, and this is important I want to connect the dots on with I do declare. Abortion rights groups are particularly concerned that Trump's choice for Attorney General, Pam Bondi, may revive the Comstock Act, an anti-vice law passed in Congress in 1873 that, among other things, bans the mailing of medication or instruments used in abortion. So interesting and appropriate as we hear your little ones in the background there.
I try to mute
They're
when I'm not talking, but because of that.
1873, and you could just be a modern man here in 2025 and say, are you serious? Are you serious that we're going to invoke this law? And I mean, look, I'm here for it. If it's on the books, then it should be in play. If it's not in play, why is it on the books? But I think it's sort of a the norm and normie in the suburbs. They think like that's ridiculous. 1873, that's when we had banditos robbing trains. What are you talking about here, right? And on this issue where both sides are clearly defining where they stand, New Jersey wants to murder all the babies all the time on demand. And then you contrast that with people like at Live Action, Lila Rose's group, and their response to a bad decision, one that went against them. But I think that, now that the political winds have changed and there's a little bit of confidence in the sales is an interesting point to bring up. So pro-lifers are thrilled by a New Mexico Supreme Court ruling against sanctuary cities for the unborn, because apparently in this country it is completely allowable to declare your city or your state a sanctuary for illegal aliens. But you can't declare your city or your state a sanctuary for babies inside of the womb, right? So New Mexico.
So that sounds like a violation of the Equal Protection Clause, Steve.
Yeah, but we're worried about declare the Equal Protection Clause on X, because otherwise it's really not the law of the land.
I do declare.
New Mexico Supreme Court ruled against Lea and Roosevelt counties in the cities of Clovis and Hobbs, claiming their passage of pro-life sanctuary cities for the unborn ordinances exceeded their authority by enacting ordinances preempted by state law. Okay. Now, here's where I'm going to close the loop on this one, Garrett. And this is why pro-lifers are actually encouraged by the fact that they lost this case. And I don't think that they're spinning like tops in order to win the PR game. However, despite the apparent loss, the decision has thrilled legal representatives of the cities and counties who passed the pro-life measures, as well as pro-life activists who supported the ordinance. Why? Because the ruling acknowledged the validity of the federal Comstock Act, which prohibits the mailing of abortion-inducing drugs and other devices. So all that to say, Pam Bondi, you better get briefed up on 19th century legislation.
Get your act together, Pam. No more interstate via USPS murder drugs.
So where do you stand? Why don't you declare your position on this? Are you all necessary measures to do whatever you can to stop the baby sacrifice that's gone on here? Because that's where I am at.
Yeah, I am. I mean, I'm through and through an abolitionist when it comes to baby murder, infanticide, call it what you want. I know they tried, and they've successfully manipulated the language to just call it abortion, and now are stretching to call it women's health care. We know those are both lies straight from the depths of hell. But yeah, I also think of the long-term war here. Roe versus Wade didn't get ratified via Supreme Court case law for decades. People were wanting it basically probably since before the women's suffrage movement. Then fast forward many decades more, and it didn't get overturned. And as much as I would like to say, Lord, just smite us with your righteous judgment for this alone, I think I've been clear about this on the show before. As a nation, we owe a blood debt to God for the 70 or more million babies that we have murdered. I think it's probably more than that, because how do you accurately track this? So I would count it a win if the next step, because last Trump term we had the Dobbs decision, which is a step in the right direction. And then, as you mentioned, was immediately weaponized against pro-lifers, which made no sense, which was one of the main things that led to me becoming a whistleblower. But that aside, I think a next step could be, and we've seen it already with spending and just in one day, the things Trump is already starting to do. So another step in the right direction would be no more federal funding to a place like Planned Parenthood. If you want to do baby murder, go ahead and fund it on your own. And like I said, I don't want it at all. But I think of the pregnancy crisis center my wife volunteers at, and they don't get government money. It's all private donors. So Planned Parenthood can operate the same way. But no, because we're godless heathens overall, we have said, oh, the government can fund it by and large. And it's to the tune of millions and millions and millions of dollars. And so, yeah, I would count that a win if we even just get that step in the next couple of years.
All above, all aboard, the strategy, I think, is completely and wholly appropriate. It's almost the patented answer that every politician does when they don't want to say drill baby drill is, I'm for all potential things. We want to use wind and solar and nuclear. Well, we don't say nuclear. Everything is on the table. Everything's on the table to end the vicious processes that we've all been subject to and witnessed to, and just kind of idly stood by here. Let's pivot away from this particular issue, though, and get to the one I think that's been discussed a lot. I think that's worth digging into a little bit and contrasting and having a deeper discussion about the mutually assured destruction angle that I like to bring up a lot as it pertains to the cold civil war currently happening in the country. And that's with the pardon issue. So yesterday we had an inauguration at 12 o'clock Eastern time is when the peaceful transition of power occurred, when Joseph Robinette Biden, solid middle name,
I do declare.
became the former president. But on his way out the door, or at least his handlers on his way out the door, they issued a whole bunch of pardons. They wind up pardoning Mark Milley, who was arguably committing treason because he was communicating with his counterpart in China. As a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, pardoned everybody on the J6 committee, pardoned Anthony Fauci, the fact that we don't talk about him, taking action against teenagers in New York with HIV. People get really mad about the dogs and the flies is probably another life issue conversation to have, but all of them got the pardons preemptively, right? I mean, they hadn't been charged with a crime or anything. And that off the back of 4 years ago, Joe Biden saying that he would never issue these preemptive pardons. Also off the back of him pardoning his own son, giving him 11 years time that was when Joe Biden was vice president and probably involved in his son's business dealings, which he again lied about not being involved in. And then the other one that was, I believe, I've seen it. I don't know the exact time, but I believe it's somewhere in the area of 15 minutes before the peaceful transition of power, right? He issues these pardons of Fauci and Milley and everybody on J6 committee like a couple hours before. So the Trump team could probably take that, digest it, respond to it however they wanted. But 15 minutes before you get up to deliver the inaugural address, you're probably not going to be able to include anything about that, any remarks. You're not going to be briefed up on it. And that was the fact that Joe Biden pardoned his own family again. He pardoned 5 members of his family in the final minutes of his time as our 46th president. And here's the quote. And I don't think he gave this quote. I think this, again, was one of his handlers. Quote, "My family has been subjected to unrelenting attacks and threats motivated solely by a desire to hurt me, the worst kind of partisan politics. Unfortunately, I have no reason to believe these attacks will end." He wound up pardoning James, his brother, who was involved in some shenanigans that we've confirmed in South Florida. His Sarah Jones Biden, James's wife, so his sister-in-law, Valerie Biden Owens, his sister, John T. Owens, that's her husband, and Francis Biden, who is also Joe Biden's brother. Hey, Garrett, the people going after Biden's family through purely partisan means, right? Maybe they have a position of authority and an ability to take away their freedom, charge them with the crime. Who's been in charge of the Department of Justice the last 4 years?
Joe Biden. Joe Biden's Merrick Garland, his essentially his right hand man to his tin pot dictatorship. I mean, this is what happens, Steve. This is what would happen in a tin pot dictatorship. Considering the dictator wouldn't be executed like Georgescu, as a callback to Saturday's episode, but take Hunter Biden. You mentioned we covered that here on the show. I'm sure everybody listening to this show knows about that pardon and how ridiculous that is. But from a pragmatic standpoint, If you're the president, and just as a human being, of course you're going to want to protect your criminal son. Everyone with a rational brain knows that Hunter Biden is a drug addicted, sex fiend criminal. So, okay, Joe Biden pardons his drug addicted son. I mean, cut the guy some slack. He's a drug addict. What are we gonna do? He's acting like he's 15 and he's in his 50s. And Joe Biden's okay, fine, okay, let's move on. But now this, 15 minutes before you're out the door, essentially, you're pardoning a bunch of family members. Why? If you guys didn't do anything wrong, or if you call back to the end of Trump's first term, when you had people like Adam Schiff going on the talk show saying, "Oh, if Donald Trump pardons people in his cabinet or in his family, that's an admission of guilt." And now fast forward 4 years, and Joe Biden is the one doing it. So who's guilty? Who's weaponized the government over the last nearly decade? Because it started before Trump was even in office. Well, let's be frank. It started many, 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 many decades ago. It has intensified in the last decade or so, and really intensified in the last 4 years under Joe Biden, your tin pot dictator that, praise the Lord, is out.
There's a couple of things that I think are worth bringing up with this, because now the toothpaste is out of the tube, right? The precedent has been set. So all the wailing and gnashing of teeth in anticipation of either Trump's first term or second term, they were saying he's going to issue these preemptive pardons, which is a gross abuse of power. I think that was something that Chuck Schumer uttered. The same guy who said that the intelligence community could get you 6 ways from Sunday. And they were very uber concerned about it. Meanwhile, they've accepted these pardons, have everybody who's a member of the J6 committee. And I'm not going to do the thing that the Republicans love to do, which is let's talk about the hypocrisy. I want to talk about the opportunity here, because this is not an optimal situation. I don't want to be here, but if you just sit idly by and do the Bill Barr and say, well, we have to be better than that, the better angels of our nature, you are negotiating with terrorists. You are going to a metaphorical gunfight at the OK Corral, and you're not bringing a firearm with you, right? You're going to lose. These are the battlefield conditions. Again, suboptimal. I don't want to be here, but you have to accept the battlefield conditions. Cold Civil War, and now it's your opportunity, because you can't even say that through a PR lens that, well, this is unprecedented. Well, no, now a precedent's been set. So preemptive pardons for all of mine, right? And I think that there's also opportunities to be creative where we have the chance now that people have been pardoned that they can't invoke their Fifth Amendment and say, well, I don't want to self-incriminate myself. Well, you've been issued a pardon. You don't have a right now. We're going to subpoena you, and we're going to try to get you in a perjury trap. Or where's the state charge? Where's the Fannie Willis for the right? Because these pardons are only federal, right?
Right.
They're not state. The president can't pardon you from a state charge. So Ken Paxton in Texas, attorney general, just start charging him with state crimes.
Yep.
I mean, in Florida, they had the grand jury come in and do an investigation of the coronavirus vaccine stuff. Let's impanel a grand jury and indict Anthony Fauci.
Right. I mean, we should. And I know they would say, well, that's the weaponization that we talked about, and the weaponization that we feared would happen under fascist Donald Trump.
Yep. Social compact's broken. I don't care.
Yes, right. And I would take it a step further, and I'm sure people would say, hey, well, you're making a difference without a distinction, or a distinction without a difference. I would say this is not weaponization. This is justice. Because what has happened since before Donald Trump became President 45, like I mentioned a little bit ago, before then, the federal government was weaponized against the regime's political, social, and religious enemies, which is essentially everyone who's right of center and to the right of that. And that is not okay in a land of the free. And we can point to what we've talked about recently in the last few episodes. 50% of government employees in Washington, D.C. already plan to subvert the incoming administration. We know from our time in the FBI, and if you just take a pragmatic look at government, you know that it leans heavy, heavy, heavy to the left. In an alleged land of the free, that is not okay. Or at least, if you cannot check your own biases at the door and go and do the work for everyone on behalf of all, then then that's not okay. And then that becomes a dictatorship. And then that leads to a secret police force, and it leads to political weaponization, like we have seen. That is not supposed to occur in this country. Quite frankly, I would love that it wouldn't occur ever in any country, but especially here for what we were founded on and why, to have come this far in about 250 years. It's it's actually really pitiful and disgusting to see and be a part of. But we can seize our moment. We can carpe diem going forward here, and seize the day and try to make some true change. And I think that includes using some of the powers of the state. I also think that that would be a good stand for federalism, which we are supposed to have in this nation.
The communists only understand pain and fear of future pain. So there needs to be what's good for the goose is good for the gander. It ain't no fun when the rabbit's got the gun. And then there's the whole other element to it, because this was one of the big ones for me. I was on a program last week and they asked me, if Donald Trump gives this inaugural address, what would you like to hear him say? And I said, I just want to hear him list 1,500 names, January 6ers, and just walk off the stage. All these people are pardoned. And he didn't do that in the inaugural, but a couple hours later, he basically did. And I want to close the loop on this because he has the power of the pardon now. Here's the clip of him actually issuing the pardon. And I think there's another element that we need to bring up here. And Donald Trump, and you see like the number of things he's signing on the desk, which is hysterical.
Absurd.
But this is the official pardoning.
Sir? Yes, sir. First, we have a list of pardons and commutations relating to events that occurred on January 6, 2021.
Okay, and how many people is this?
I think this order will apply to approximately 1,500 people, sir.
So this is January 6th. These are the hostages. Approximately 1,500 for a pardon.
Yes.
Full pardon.
Full pardon or commutation?
Full pardon. We have about 6 commutations in there where we're doing further research. Nice to see you again.
He can't help but own the media when he's there.
You know, say what you want, and this is a pivotal moment already. But I'm just happy to have him back because of his mannerisms. It's just great theater, and it's not theatrics by him. That's just how he is.
He can't help but be a troll at a certain level, right?
Great to
He's
see
basically
you
the
again.
Fox News watcher who's throwing things at the television to a certain level. But to this one, I was even asking you guys months and months ago, I think it was over the summer or in the lead up to the presidential election. I said, is it a good argument to say that you would vote for Donald Trump to be president just to ensure that Steve Baker gets pardoned? Like nothing else mattered to you at all? And I think there's a pretty good solid case for that. So really happy for a guy like Steve Baker to have that monkey off his back on this one. But I think it's also worth talking about it because I wanted to compare it almost to a sports analogy, right? Where, well, let's just take like the most violent sport where it's acceptable to fight. Like let's take like a hockey game, right? Where that's actually part of the sport. Right. You send your enforcer out there to go fight the other team. And that's a way that they have a release valve of tensions and they let the better players play the game without getting cheap shotted. Right. Now, if you're in a hockey game with one side and another, and the communist guys are doing their thing and making us angry, but then one of our guys goes like over the top with a stick and then just starts beating the other guy, right? Like that's wholly inappropriate. And a fight breaks out.
Yeah, and you pull
Do
your
we
guy
allow
off.
our guy to get mauled by the other team?
No.
If he did something wrong, though, we handle that in-house,
Yeah,
right?
we'll take care of that. Yeah.
That's what this is. This is not, oh, he's weaponizing. This is, look, Biden did it already, and we're going to police our own. People that did anything wrong, we'll handle that. We're not going to leave that up to our enemy to adjudicate at this point. That's the battlefield conditions here.
Yep. This is so. I'll be clear, Steve. I wasn't holding my breath on this. I wasn't.
It wasn't.
I didn't know, and I quite frankly, I don't think I believed that he was going to do this at least right away. I may not have thought he was going to do it ever. I thought maybe a couple here and there to appease some people, but I think this is a step in the right direction. And when I think of January 6th, I know it's a big event in our history, and I know a lot of people were affected by it. And you mentioned Steve. You mentioned Steve Baker, friend of the show, fellow suspendable, and I even think back to nearly a year ago now. I think it was in late February or early March when he got perp walked, and he's wearing his suspendables lapel pin, and that led to a flood of orders to the-suspendables.com. I was busy. We were busy for 5 weeks straight. I mean, this was essentially all I was doing was trying to fulfill orders because he got arrested and said, I'm proudly going to wear this. And I kind of am ashamed of that because it's like, oh, we're going to be able to sell some t-shirts and some lapel pins because he got perp walked. And I know he doesn't take it that way. But then to take it a step further, probably not everybody knows this, but if you go back through a friend of the show, fellow suspendable Kyle Serafin's podcast, we did an episode around number 200 or so of his, where it's called the reasonableness standard, where we talked about a SWAT raid that I was on. Marine Corps Captain Christopher Kuhn was arrested by my SWAT team, and it was based on lies. I truly believe that we were lied to. We were told that he was manufacturing weapons. We were told that he is a threat, that he was a violent criminal in the January 6th event, and none of that was true. And guess what happened with him, Steve? They ran the playbook on him, which led to the SWAT raid. The next day after he was arrested, his wife, Annette, lost the baby that she miscarried the next day, and he went to prison. He just got out like a few weeks ago. He had like a 70-day sentence, and now he gets pardoned. How do you fix the rest of that? It's not possible. This is a step in the right direction, absolutely, but how do you undo what cannot be undone, and of which I played a part in? And then another example is Colton Maccabee, who I've become friends with his wife Sarah and Joe Hanneman, who's extensively covered their story. He's up in Minneapolis in a prison. Well, he's out now. He got out last night.
There was resistance to even letting them out last night. I was seeing all that the
Yeah.
prisons were saying, well, it's a holiday. We can't let them out. Yeah, maybe sometime tomorrow.
Screw you.
Excuse
You know?
me?
Yeah.
You have an innocent person by the pardon standard.
Right.
They're innocent now,
Right.
incarcerated.
Mm-hmm.
And there had to be a pretty big logistical lift because they're calling all these federal facilities all over the place. And
Right.
I had my contacts with people, have heard some just miserable stories, and thinking about people sort of the same way you did, the people that actually did significant time in prison, like they
Right.
can't get that time back.
Right.
Right. I mean, and I guess now they can go get a firearm, right? Or have their record expunged in some way. I don't even know how you apply for a job. And they say,
Right.
have you ever
How
been
do-
convicted of a
Yeah.
crime? Do you say
Yes.
yes?
And then it was pardoned.
But then it was pardoned. I mean, that's a whole weird thing to exist in.
And
Their
then what
lives are
about okay, I can buy a gun. Okay, with what money? With what job? With what wages that I've lost?
Yeah.
What about health insurance? What about mental health? What about moving forward now? I
the-
mean, this is going to have a rippling effect for decades, and I'm certain that there will be people who will not be able to recover just because of their mental status. They won't be able to recover, and
the 3 steps forward into weaponization that we're taking here cannot be undone with 1 step back. You're not going to be able to get those 3 exact steps back no matter what. It's like taking steps in sand, right? But at the same time, you have to make every effort to get as far back as you can to the original starting point and then take more ground.
right.
Like the people that sat around the conference table and said, we're going to go after these people when we know they didn't do anything. And we're
Yeah,
going to
I think an appropriate next step, and I thought of this a little more thoroughly this morning because I saw a tweet by Steve where he said, I'm going to go pick up my guns. I'm not going to call pretrial services to tell them when I'm traveling. I'm going to start drunk texting my FBI agent, which he didn't name this time, but I will, Craig Noyes, out of the Charlotte office. The next best step, in my opinion, is you hold people like Craig Noyes accountable. You were nothing but a good German. Any reasonable law enforcement officer who got that case, who had the access to the videos like we had when we were FBI agents, and saw what Steve Baker was doing, would not have pursued that case. So I don't care what you were told by your SSA or your AUSA, you need to stand firm and say, no, this is not just. And now look, all the effort, all the money just in your salary and the AUSA's salary and everybody involved, millions and millions of dollars in just salary. For what? For a bunch of pardons because these arrests should have never happened in the first place. At least the vast majority of them. But of course, then you have to do a sweeping action like this because how do you sift through at that point? So you have to come with a heavy hand and say, okay, mass pardons because the atrocity has been too egregious in a country that's supposed to have a Fourth Amendment, a Fifth Amendment, and dude, it just obviously you can see I'm fired up. But.
Greg Noyes, who he probably needs to talk to his county property assessor because I found your $800,000 house, Greg. I didn't publicize it, but looks nice. You should probably do something about that because accountability is coming. Hopefully through the right channels. Hopefully you wind up penniless and having your family abandoning you, and then in a situation where you have a security clearance revoked and not able to get your training documents, something like, I don't know, I mean, like a FBI whistleblower
Yeah,
experience,
man,
something like that.
hopefully you're not in the middle of a transfer, Craig. Granted, who would want to transfer from Charlotte? We know you got there and planned on staying, but hopefully your household goods won't be locked up and your kids won't have their winter coat in storage that the FBI won't let you have. But
Um,
and I know again, and I'll say this too. This isn't retributive. I have done the research on this because we've been suspended for 29 months, you and me, because we both September of 2022. So when they say, "Oh, I'm suspending your clearance for whatever adjudicative guideline," fill in the blank. Okay, well, all of the Craig Noyes out there, guideline E of the 13 adjudicative guidelines, guideline E, personal conduct. You have betrayed your oath. That's egregious enough personal conduct where you are no longer fit to have a security clearance. Bye. And that is just. That's not retributive. That is just.
let's talk about, as long as we're on that subject, some of the executive orders that came down. I saw reporting that there was going to be like 200 executive orders. I'm like, I hope he has an auto pen because that's worse than a mortgage agreement, right? Um, but there was, I think, some really good ones that came out about reinstating people into the military who
Mhm.
lost their positions over coronavirus. Some other ones, but the big one for you and me was the ending of the weaponization of the federal government executive order, which is not long on details. I think it's more of like a motif, right? There's a directive to certain authorities, like the attorney general, to take steps to remedy what has happened. Do you think that this is more symbolic? I mean, I'm happy no matter what. I mean,
Mhm.
but I'm fearful that, having sat in a congressional hearing where that was entirely symbolic at best. Mostly it was just a
Yeah.
grift to get more Twitter followers and
And news hits
cable
on
news
Laura
hits
Ingram.
and re-elections. Um, do you think that this is something that maybe there's going to be an appetite to follow through on? Because I think that's good, and I'm glad that he did declare that that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I read through that too, and I was like, man, this is a little thin on details, which maybe that
I
was.
would have loved to see Garrett O'Boyle shall be reinstated in like
Yeah,
subsection B.
yes. I'd be doing the Elon Musk. Yes, yes. But no, I read through that and I was like, man, this is kind of thin. And then I thought, all right, take a step back and suppress the closeness that you have to this weaponization issue and just think about it. Try to think about it pragmatically for a minute. And I thought, okay, maybe this is intentionally thin to give a lot of wiggle room to rectifying some of this weaponization. Because okay, sure, you're gonna he already was clear about reinstating 8,500 or something like that service members who were sent out because of the jab. Okay, well, what about the people who self-selected out of the service, who didn't reenlist for that the last time, who left the career because they thought they saw the writing on the wall, and they did because the writing was on the wall for about 4 years, but now this. So maybe that wiggle room is intentional to, or maybe that thinness is intentional to give wiggle room so that they, as the days and weeks and months and maybe even years kind of tick by, whoever's handling this, which it's going to have to be kind of a big team at this point, whoever's handling it can say, okay, what are the details of your case? Okay, yeah, that looks retributive. Okay, it looks like COVID was a big crucial piece of that, as it was for all of us. Which I will say until I go to the grave that that's intentional. That's not a coincidence. That's not how these things work. It's not just a coincidence that aside from Garrett O'Boyle, Steve Friend, Marcus Allen, and Kyle Seraphin, no, there's about 10 others, or maybe even 12 others, where the COVID vax mandate is the root. The if you watch the hearings over the summer with Christopher Wray, where they brought up what they called the Trump questionnaire, Chris Wray testified that it was one questionnaire and one time. That was a lie, because we know two people who didn't get the COVID vaccine that had a similar questionnaire. Both, for all intents and purposes, could be dubbed the Trump questionnaire. They were a little bit different, but there was at least two cases that we know of where that happened.
And one of them's me. No, I don't know if you're
Okay,
thinking
three.
of two other.
There's three then. There's three. And
So that's another perjury charge. And I don't think Chris Wray got a
he didn't.
pardon.
He didn't get a
Huh.
pardon.
Yeah, and longer on the executive orders, I did really like the 51 spies who lies losing their security clearances. It's back to that 3 steps forward, 1 step back. Not 1 step back, not 3 steps back. We need to take more ground now. So getting rid of their security clearances is a good step. I think that needs to be taken for other people, like with the weaponization of the federal government, people who did you wrong and others like you wrong that have now gone on to other careers, like Jennifer Moore. She needs to be held accountable. Same as the J6 persecutors need to be held accountable. She
The
needs to
Sean
lose her
Clarks
clearance.
of the
She
world.
needs to be charged with perjury. There needs to be a significant effort to shift everything and actually gain back some of the ground. Now let's talk about Department of Homeland Security, because as long as we're declaring things, this
I
was
got some questions about this, Steve.
this was a nice statement though. And I did like it because language is very important to me, not because I'm a pedantic jerk, which may or may not be true, but because
I think
language
you're
gets
witty.
to your mindset.
I think you're a witty fellow, not a pedantic jerk.
All right. So for those listening, you're not going to hear this. I'll try to maximize as much as I can. So this is a memo from Department of Homeland Security saying that they anticipated changes at 12:01 hours on January 20th because of the new president. So executive orders were coming down, and per headquarters, they could now start to use the term illegal alien. No longer are they going to use undocumented, said migrate. Again, they're Department of Homeland Security, so not too good on the grammar. But I think that's good. I call them
Yeah.
illegal aliens for a reason.
That's what they are.
They're illegally here.
Yes, and that's how our law is written, to call it. It calls them aliens. The law uses that verbiage. So why would I not be able to use that in my freaking report?
It's mean.
But here's my question about the DHS. I don't know if you remember. I don't know if we covered it. We may have. Alejandro Mayorkas came out about a week ago, maybe a few days
Didn't get a
ago.
pardon, by the way.
Didn't get a pardon. And so this is, and I mean, I don't have any proof for this, but I thought, he went on MSNBC, I think it was, and said,
Yep, that's exactly where I went.
And then he didn't get a pardon, and I was like, "Uh-oh, homeboy spoke out too soon."
Yep, I was kind of waiting to see the pardons that came out, like blanket for the January 6th committee, and then a Sharpie over the line of Alejandro Mayorkas because it was too late to print a new copy before they had the auto pen sign it. I think that, he spoke out of turn and now didn't get his comeuppance, or maybe he will get his comeuppance now. I'm not going to hold my breath on the legislative branch to do anything of the sort. They tried to hold him accountable and impeach him and couldn't do it at first. They couldn't corral enough support for it. But maybe we'll get an energetic Pam Bondi who charges Alejandro with perjury, with treason, because he allowed willfully millions of people to come across the southern border. All right, let's.
I would even be fine with the Trump team going to him, bringing him in a closed door meeting and saying, "Look, dude, we got the goods on you. We will pardon you if you come and spill the beans in a public forum."
He's such a jerk, though. He does the Obama Mussolini mannerism where he picks up his nose
He does
and
do
looks
that.
down his nose at the people.
As part of that's because he's so short, I think. So even when he sits, he's got that Napoleon.
You're 6'14", Garrett. Everyone looks short to you.
Fair, fair.
Let's talk about how the American people are declaring that the legacy media are not exempt from our standards anymore. And we covered down on the CNN lawsuit. I think it was a Jonathan Turley piece that we discussed a couple weeks ago, where they defame someone and they always hide behind this, well, person in the public sphere, there's a higher standard for defamation. And I always say, well, if you put them on national TV, you have elevated them to be in the public sphere. That shouldn't be a defense. So there was this lawsuit by this, I believe he was a special forces guy who was helping to try to evacuate people out of Afghanistan. And they accused him of being some sort of like tyrant, or he was profiting, a war profiteer, because he was charging exorbitant rates to get people out when he was taking on quite a bit of risk. But I found the video where the CNN made the accusations and then tried to say, oh, our bad, apologize, and that should suffice. And we'll get an update on the case because the American people said, no, that's not going to fly here. So this is a two-part. This comes from Maze, who does pretty good video clips. And it's November of 2021 where they actually defamed this guy whose name is Zach. And they waited 4 months to apologize. It wasn't really like quick. We'll give this a play with Jim Acosta, who loves him some Jim Acosta.
Nearly 3 months after the fall of Afghanistan, many Afghans are still desperate to leave. CNN's Alex Marquardt found a black market ready to take advantage.
We Skyped with a father of 3 in Kabul who had just met with a man offering to get them on an evacuation flight list. What is the U.S. doing that you know of to try to get you and your family out?
Unfortunately, they are not doing now anything. Up to 31st, they said everything is closed and it's finished. We did not receive anything back from the U.S. Embassy or from any other organization.
So he went online, where he found a man named Zachary Young, who is one of many advertising evacuations from Afghanistan, posting just this week, "We can deliver." One LinkedIn user posted messages with Young, where Young said it would be $75,000 for a car to Pakistan. He told another it would be $14,500 per person to get to the United Arab Emirates, or Albania, for another $4,000. Prices well beyond the reach of most Afghans. We got Young's number and called, but he didn't pick up. In a text message, he told CNN that Afghans trying to leave are expected to have sponsors pay for them. If someone reaches out, we need to understand if they have a sponsor behind them to be able to pay evacuation costs, which Young says are highly volatile and based on environmental realities. Young repeatedly declined to break down the costs or say if he's making money.
And our thanks to Alex Marquardt for that eye-opening report.
And before we go, a correction. In November, we ran a story about Afghans desperate to flee the country who face paying high sums beyond the reach of average Afghans. The story included a lead-in and banner throughout the story that referenced a black market. The use of the term black market in the story was an error. The story included reporting on Zachary Young, a private operator who had been contacted by family members of Afghans trying to flee the country. We did not intend to suggest that Mr. Young participated in a black market. We regret the error, and to Mr. Young, we apologize.
Liar. She's a liar. She's lying. The apology is a lie. It's all a lie. As I'm watching that first piece, and I know we talked about this, but I'm thinking about it again, just from a realistic perspective. And I'm like, oh, $14.5K per person, that's actually not that much. And I think
he's going into a war zone,
yes,
man.
Yes. And do you know how much it costs?
You have to charter a jet.
Yeah. To get there. Then to
no, you should just give that away to people.
Right. And then to get into country, to buy a Toyota Hilux or whatever type of jingle truck you're going to get to go and get these people, to have comms, to have satellite phones, to get in touch, to have an interpreter, to then pick up everybody, and then to have enough water and food, and then to get them out of country, and then to get them into some other country. And it's a black market, and but we didn't intend to infer that. You're a freaking liar.
Well, this guy took it all the way to trial, and because of the discovery, as we talked about with the Jonathan Turley piece, they gave him a call, right, a chance to respond, and then they went to air.
Yeah.
Within like 2 hours, he responded, and they were really upset that they were hoping to have no comments, right, because it looks like it's almost like an NDA situation where they can just bash you and you're not going to do anything. He claimed that they defamed him. He claimed that they hurt his ability to have an income, and then they do
True.
emotional damage and that sort of thing, which is just punitive in some regard. I mean, the guy's an operator. I don't think that he gets hurt feelings that often, but I could be wrong on that. But I found this over at Media Research Center, the Newsbuster, and this was the update to this case. Breaking: CNN found liable for defamation of Navy vet Zachary Young. So last week, Friday, a jury of 6 in Florida. Thank you. Florida's awesome. They found that CNN was liable for the defamation of Navy veteran Zachary Young and that he was entitled to economic and emotional damages. They found that CNN's reporters had demonstrated expressed malice, actual malice, and outrageous behavior, which opened the door for a massive punitive damages judgment. The jury found Young was entitled to $4 million in economic damages and $1 million in emotional damages. So $5 million. And then they reached a settlement undisclosed on the punitive. So we'll never know. I mean, I hope he got the Sandman money.
Yeah. Dude, this is great news. It makes me think we need to find you a Florida attorney to sue the New York Times about you shooting your gun in a hurricane in your backyard, which is not true. And
if you do that, the bullets can turn around and hit you, right?
Yes, just like in the Matrix. But this is great. This is what I also, though, it kind of infuriating that it's buried past the comics in the newspaper. If this was the print edition, but thank you to your tenacity, you're able to dig it up. This is great news. Day 2 of President Trump's 47th reign as president, and it's off to a good. And I know that was prior, but this is good news all around.
So reading through what was going on in this trial, the judge was admonishing the CNN attorney because the CNN attorney basically went off and was insulting Zachary Young in open court. And the judge basically said to him, "This isn't kindergarten.
Yeah.
You apologize to him right now," and made him say, "I'm sorry."
Yeah. This isn't kindergarten, but now I'm going to treat you like a kindergartner because you're acting like one.
It was excellent. CNN deserves every bit of it. They think that they're going to get, I guess, a Trump derangement syndrome boost here. I don't think that's going to happen. I think they burned their credibility with coronavirus really badly with the death ticker. And I don't think they're going to get a lot of people coming back to them, but that remains to be seen. I still am holding out my prediction for 2025 that we will see at least one, I don't know if you say legacy or unknown brand in media that in order to save costs will go artificial intelligence. They'll fire personnel on screen and it'll be AI. You don't have to pay it. You don't have to turn it off. Doesn't have to take a bathroom break. And then they'll also say artificial intelligence is doing our digital content. It's nonpartisan. And they'll just give it up. That's my big prediction for 2025.
Dude, that's a good prediction. I mean, honestly, one person sitting at a desk for 8 hours a day, you know how many stories they could crank out with ChatGPT alone? And just cut and paste and
program your ChatGPT. Hey, be a communist.
Yeah.
And it'll generate whatever you want to have. All right, Garrett, I got one more. And again, staying on the subject of the people declaring where they stand. Did you know we might have some unity finally in just how jacked up everything is?
Unity would be good.
On the nation's political system, it was Democrats, Republicans, and all U.S. adults. 91% of Americans say that the political system is broken.
Okay. I concur.
Why do all of the office holders, incumbents, continue to win?
It's the best we have, apparently. I don't know. The best who will run or who have the money to back up a run at this point. Because, man, I can think of a dozen people just on my block who would be better than Mike Johnson.
And look, we're talking about this even within our inner circles for an FBI having Kash Patel become the director. There's going to have to be just capable people that step up and take roles because it's really not that hard. I mean, these dweebs have been running field offices. They're not competent people. You're just going to have to get into the role. Not be, I don't know, the acting FBI director who has 3 years of investigative experience at this point. Brian Driscoll, heard some mixed accounts about him. For those who don't know, he got the nod as the interim acting director of the FBI yesterday because Paula Bate left on day one. So now Brian Driscoll, who was appointed to the special agent in charge position in Newark, last week, is taking the big boy chair for a little while. Look through his background: 3 years investigative experience at a New York City, so 0 years investigative experience. And then he went to the hostage rescue team, which is the tier 1 asset, and went back to doing some other headquarters stuff and wound up being in charge of the hostage rescue team, which may or may not have been involved in the Mar-a-Lago raid. So hopefully Cash gets to the FBI forthwith. We do have a palate cleanse for the day, Garrett. Interested where you. Why don't you declare your worldview for us, though, before we get to it?
I do declare. Now, in frankness, I've got a bit of an ask for you, the American Radicals podcast. And I'll start with what I ended with on here. For those of you watching, you can see it on the screen. 1 John 3:17 through 18 says, "But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and in truth." And I will say that for the last 29 months, if it wasn't for people like you who have given, who have bought merch, who have subscribed to the podcast, the Substack, bought Steve's book, you name it, or just have freely given out of, there's been people who have sent us boxes of meat. There have been people who've messaged me on Twitter or wherever and said, "Hey, what's your Venmo? I just want to help you for Christmas," or whatever. There's been some of you who have given recurring, just over almost the entire time. And it has been tremendous. And I know that we have a unique community here, but I do have an ask. So if you're just listening, up on the screen, it says supporting Angeline and her children after the fire. I've mentioned it before, and I think it's a good time to bring up here because we talked about infanticide earlier on in the episode. As I've mentioned before, my wife, she volunteers at a pregnancy crisis center, and her most recent mentee, she just had her second child. She's got 2 little boys. The father's no longer in the picture. She's young. She's in her early 20s, and her apartment complex essentially was catastrophically damaged by fire right before Thanksgiving. And it was actually her neighbor who started the fire as a grease fire or something to that effect. And she actually found his body, and she's kind of struggling with the trauma of that. And then, no longer having the father of her boys in the picture, and now just trying to pick the pieces up and put it back together. And so if you could, don't go and buy a t-shirt. Don't go and become a paid subscriber to my Substack. Don't send me money. But for the foreseeable future, if you have a little bit extra, and I know this can't apply to everyone, but for those of you who do, if you could go to GiveSendGo/Angeline, ANGELINE, GiveSendGo.com/Angeline, and just give a little bit for her so we can help her pick up the pieces after this fire and with this newborn. I would be grateful probably forever. I'll put something out on Twitter soon about this too. But yeah, GiveSendGo.com/Angeline. I would highly appreciate that if you could help us out there.
Excellent, sir. And I didn't mention this to you before. Unfortunately, my boys lost the Natty last night. But they did have the lead early in the game, and when the quarterback scored a touchdown, he had Matthew 23:12 on his wristband. Whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. So I'm going to quote some scripture to you today, give you the Jesus juke, and then I'm also going to give you the palate cleanse involving our favorite superhero and his interactions with the Riddler, with a twist of what modern day terrorism really would look like if Batman engaged with it with an iPhone. I don't know. It's kind of weird and fun.
There's no escape, Riddler. Where are the bombs?
Not so fast, Batman. Answer my riddle and I shall tell all that you want. Get it wrong and Gotham shall fall.
Damn you, Riddler.
I have cities but no houses. I have mountains but no trees. I have water but no fish. What am I? What are you doing?
No, I'm just a map.
Did you try this for size? I come from a mine and get surrounded by wood always. Everyone. Okay, I see what you're doing.
I'm not doing anything.
No, I clearly
Pencil lead.
You've just been Googling these?
What? No, I was just telling Robin about how he's really missing out here.
You know, I put a lot of time and effort into these, with the riddles and everything.
Yeah, well, it's kind of weird. I can just find all of these riddles online. Isn't that kind of just strange?
You know how difficult it is to get away with putting like 5 bombs across the city wearing green spandex?
Maybe just don't.
You know, Batman, I really don't have any friends or anything. This is like my one social interaction of the month, and you're kind of ruining it for me right now.
Okay, I hear you. Counterpoint. You're a terrorist.
Oh, so all of a sudden that justifies you cheating?
In every conceivable way.
That's the crime fighting ability we need at America's premier law enforcement agency. It's also doing it against a bad guy wearing green tights. So always good times here. All right, that'll do it for us today, guys, on the American Radicals podcast. If you haven't already, do smash the thumbs up and follow the channel on Rumble. Make sure you're giving at X America News a follow if you are an X user, and make sure you subscribe to the audio format because we're trying to grow here and we appreciate every little bit. And we'll be back with you Thursday, 10:30 here, rumble.com/amradpod. Until then, have a great day.
You've been listening to the voice of the Suspendables on the American Radicals podcast. Follow us on rumble.com/amradpod.